Well, welcome, friends. You know, there's sometimes in life you run across good people, growed up in these mountains and got a lot of stories to tell, a lot of experience too. And I love to run into them, especially our elders. And I've got a good man here, a good Christian man that I know, Ray Lehman. He's 90 years old. He spent his whole life in these mountains working. And I'll just introduce you to him. This is Ray Lehman. Hey, Ray, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah, where was you born and raised at, Ray?
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Chattanooga, just north of it.
Yeah, just about 10 miles out
In a farm,
on a farm.
and you tell me TVA took the land.
Yeah, TVA took the land in the mid-30s and covered it up with Chickamauga Lake.
So many families can tell the same story. Well, you went to school in Chattanooga.
I went to school at 3 or 4 different schools. Harrison, Tennessee, I started. I went to Snow Hill and Ooltewah, and I finished up at Chattanooga Central.
Yeah, and you had a long career being a consultant, working for TVA, just mining recreation and exploration and core drilling.
Yeah, I was a certified geologist in Tennessee and Kentucky and registered surveyor in Kentucky. And I spent the biggest part of 60 years in the coal mines.
60 years in that industry. Man, you got me beat. I just spent about 40 years actually in the coal mines, working in the mines. But anyway, Ray, I know in all your 60 years career, you've come across a lot of stories in these old mountains. A lot of people have seen hard times and good times. But I know you've and come across a lot of funny stories.
Yeah.
People would like to hear about our old people.
Yeah,
well,
I have.
You want to share some of them with us?
Yeah, I can hit you with a few of them. One of them that always stuck in my mind is one that happened down near Kegel, Tennessee, which is right on the Van Buren Grundy County line. And this happened in like 62 probably. Clark Grover and me were driving down the road, and a dirt road there at Kegel, and an old man was walking along the road, and hot that afternoon. TVA cars didn't have air conditioning, so Clark picked him up, gave him a ride, and I was in the back seat with all my maps trying to sort them out, and the old man took a plug of tobacco out of his pocket and took a chew off of one corner. And Clark, being the type guy he was never met a stranger. He's friendly to everybody. He said, "Old man, do you mind if I have a bite of that?" And he handed it to him, and Clark took a chew off of the other corner. We drove a little farther, Clark chewing on his tobacco. He finally said, "Old man, this tobacco sure seems awful salty." The old man said, "Well, yeah." He said, "I've been having trouble holding my water lately, and I'm going to have to quit carrying it in my front pocket."
He spit that out, did he?
He spit it out the window. And then the next day, he told me not to tell anybody at the office about that. And of course, it's hard not to tell something like that. So next morning when Clark came to work, I was there earlier than him. And first thing the secretary said to him was, "Clark, do you want to chew tobacco this morning?"
He knew where that comes.
So he knew right quick, I had told. But another story that happened down on Scratch Ankle Hollow in Marion County, just on the Georgia line on Sand Mountain. There's a store there, Claude Watts owned a grocery store, and he also had a place to eat in there. And he also had a jukebox. And there wasn't any other place within miles that you could get anything to eat or anything. So the guy that owned the coal company I was working for and the assistant general manager, we went in there one morning to eat. And while we were sitting there, the lady had had a child maybe 10 months before or a year before, and the baby was running around in the on the concrete floor there in the restaurant, and he'd turn the jukebox on, he'd dance. Well, his diaper was full that morning, and so Doug and Mr. Barnwell was eating, and I put a quarter in the jukebox, and the little boy started dancing, and of course everything in his diaper fell out on the floor, and he's stepping in it, dancing in it, going on, and it sort of ruined their appetite. And that, as far as I know, that's the last time we ever ate there.
Yeah, ruined that, did
That was interesting. But another thing that was kind of weird, the land we were mining on down there, and I was a mine superintendent, was owned by Reliance Trust, which was owned by the Hunt family out of Dallas. Bunker Hunt was the one that looked after it. And he would come up and go out in the field with me. And he came up one day, and we were there at lunchtime. And we went down to Trenton, Georgia, to a restaurant to eat. Well, we went in and sat down at the restaurant, and the waitress asked us, what we wanted. We gave her the order. And Bunker, being worth more than $60 million, according to the computer at that time, he asked her, does a drink come with it? Does the dessert come with it? She assured him that it did. And so we ate, we got ready to leave. She brought the bill, and Bunker said to me, he said, Ray, you don't mind paying for this, do you? He said, I don't carry any cash with me. That was typical of a multimillionaire.
Yeah, always broke.
That was some of the things. And we were working on Redbird River in 1960, and we had all kind of workers up there. I had my engineering crew, geology crew, and another crew was a survey crew, and another one was one that went around and did other contract work. And one of the girls, one day, I was coming out, I always hauled 8 or 9 of the boys with me in my station wagon, so I was headed out, and this girl was on the side of the road. She flagged me down, said she had to talk to me, and all the boys started teasing me about wanting to talk to me. And I got out and walked out in front of the truck, talked to the station wagon, and talked to her a minute. And what had happened, one of the boys in one of the crews that did the paperwork on the deeds had gotten her pregnant, she said, down at the Smith Motel in Pineville. And she wanted to know, since we all work for the same company, did we all want to chip in and take care of her and the baby? The boys didn't vote on it. They didn't agree to that.
They didn't want to talk about that no more, did they?
And took me a long time to get him straightened out. I had to contact him, tell him to see her and take care of that, or I was going to have to, talk to his boss. So he straightened it out as far as I know. And on Blue Hole Creek, which is off Redbird, there was a preacher lived in the first house you come to as you cross the creek. And we made a deal with him to park our cars on the weekend and at night there and ride in 2 vehicles into Middlesboro. And every afternoon when we'd start in, he'd come out and preach to the boys about how mean the girls were in Pineville and Middlesboro and how to stay away from them and all that, not get in trouble. And then just a couple of weeks after we started leaving them there, I flew over his house in a helicopter and saw that within 500 feet of his house, he had a whiskey still. And when I confronted him with it the next time he come out to preach, he made himself scarce. We never saw him again. Huh. He would never come out and talk to us anymore.
He's ashamed to then, wasn't
he? Yeah.
You're talking about one time you was up there, I guess, prospecting around with a dozer and it raining and you went in that old house.
There was 2 or 3 different occasions on something like that. One of them was on Double Creek, a guy named Wagers. They had a whole big family up there, and they'd never seen a vehicle till we built a road up there and took our dozer in. And
what year was that?
That was about 60.
And then people had never seen a vehicle.
Kids had never seen one.
The kids had never seen.
And they live about 12 miles out of Manchester. Never been to Manchester. And we went in because it started raining, and they had a little building there. I call it a house, but it wasn't really. It's more like a barn, but it had posts up and had metal on the outside, old tin they'd gotten. The ground was a floor. They didn't have a floor in it. They put up 4 posts for a table and put some boards on it. They had nail kegs in there to sit on, and I don't know what the roof was out of. It not much, because it was raining and the rain was coming in real bad. And the dozer operator told me, he said, "Ray, we better go out and go on the dozer or we're going to drown in here." and then had another situation not too far from there where Mr. Depp had the house, and we went in raining that day, and he offered coffee to us.
Yeah.
And I don't drink coffee, so I told him I didn't want any, but Jack Fallbush, my dozer operator, he was a big coffee drinker, so he took some coffee. And when Oscar was pouring his coffee in his cup, it was so thick he had to take a spoon and cut it off when it stop it from pouring. It was that thick. It's like syrup.
Like molasses.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's probably a week-old coffee to start with.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's one hollow up there that was really bad. I went up that hollow, and there's a house up to the very end, and there's an old man sitting on the porch. I'd say old man. He's probably in his late 40s or 50s. You look older when you're up there in the mountains, seem like. And I sat on this top step, and he was up in a swing, and we were talking, and one woman come out, and she looked like she was going to have a baby any minute. In a minute, another one came out. He introduced me as being, first one was his wife. The other 2 that came out were his wife's sister, and they were all expecting. And he said, "Boy," said, "look at them." He said, "I sure messed up. I should have staggered them a little." I thought that was, the word staggers, they use a lot up there. One guy up there, he grew watermelons up there up on Straight Creek, and the hill was so steep where he was growing them, he said he had to scotch them to keep them from rolling off the hill.
Breaking off the vine. That's pretty steep.
And
you talk about seeing some old guys used to, in your early days of starting out, you still had these old hand-loading mines and mules and stuff.
yeah,
You went up there driving around them old mules, and they kicked the side of the car.
Yeah, they're down on Doss Mountain. There's a place called the Pocket, and on the Pocket, there was if there wasn't 100, there was real close to 100 mines, and all of them had either 2 to 5 men in them. There wasn't any big mines, and they were all truck mines. All of them had a mule donkey pull the coal out, and I'd been around them quite a bit, but my boss was driving the day I went up this day, and I told him, I said, "Now be careful around those mules, because they're not used to cars being up close to them." And he said, "Oh, I won't drive too close." But he drove a little too close to one of them, and it kicked the side of his car with both back feet and left hoof prints in the door. He had a hard time explaining how that happened when he took it back to the shop in Chattanooga.
I'd say he did. Yeah. Ray, you do a lot of prospecting up there in southeast Kentucky, Tennessee, and everywhere. You say you'd fly over, and these places didn't even have roads back in these hollers, did they?
Yeah, before we would prospect, well, the 60,000 acres in Kentucky, the 53,000 acres in Tennessee, I flew over with a helicopter to see where the roads were, and also to see what else was available up there. In the 60,000 acres on Redbird, when I flew over it, I wasn't looking for whiskey stills, but I spotted 54 that I had located on my map. And when I would prospect in that hollow, I would always go to that guy at the head of the hollow a week or 2 before I was going in there and tell him I was going to do it. so they could move their steel or do whatever they were going to do.
Yeah.
And they always thanked me for it.
Yeah. Well, my goodness. And you say you was working up there at some place drilling or something, and you'd been working all week back in there in that mountain, and you had a cooler in your truck, and somebody slipped a gallon of moonshine in it, and you drove it back to home.
Yeah, that happened up on I can't remember. It was south of Barberville. It was on a tract of land we'd bought from a guy down in Georgia, Kentucky Land Company. I went up to look at a mine that morning and stopped down at his house and left my car down there. And we walked about 300 feet up to the mine. And when I came back, of course, I got in the car and went on Chattanooga. That was on Friday morning. And I left my car at the shop down there so they could clean up the car. It was pretty dirty after a week out in the woods. And I went up to the office about 2 or 3 o'clock, came back down at 5, and all the boys were kind of staggering around. And they said, "Where did you get that stuff?" And I said, "What stuff?" They said, "The stuff is in your car, in that cooler." And I said, "I didn't know there was anything in it." They said, "Well, boy, it was good stuff." And I found out that the guy had put about a gallon of moonshine in there, and those guys had gotten into it, and they drank the whole thing. About 15 of them, they drank the whole gallon that afternoon, and it was hot, and they were all in bad shape.
You drove 150 miles.
Yeah,
moonshine.
I
Didn't even know.
Didn't know I had it in there, and probably would get in a lot of trouble if I had.
I'd say hard to explain.
Yeah, in 1965, people from New York came down.
Yeah,
and that owned the company I was working for, and they got ready to go home that afternoon. They asked me, did I think I could find them some moonshine? They'd like to take some moonshine back to New York that people up there that they knew never tasted Kentucky moonshine. And we were in East Kentucky that day. So I called one of my drillers in and told him I needed a gallon of moonshine. And I said, I don't know where any is. He said, oh, I'd take care of that. And he was gone about 20 minutes and come back with a gallon of moonshine. And those guys, we had some quart jars there that we'd been getting samples of water in. And we poured that gallon into 4-quart jars. And they were going to take a couple of them back to New York with them. And I told them, I said, now, if you take it back to New York and you get caught on that plane with moonshine, you know you're in deep trouble. And they said, we're going to take a chance on it. So as far as I know, they made it. But that's the only people I ever had that requested moonshine. That, of course, most of the other people I dealt with probably knew more about it than I did.
Reckon they liked it.
I don't know. I never did ask.
Never did hear them.
I never did. I wonder if they drank it on the plane.
They might have.
I mean, they were. But anyway, there was one time. Over at Williamsburg, we had a coal tipple, and they were having a problem with somebody stealing the gasoline out of the trucks at night, and especially on the weekend. And it was on Sunday night. They'd fueled up all the trucks. We had about a dozen of them sitting there in line by the tipple, and they'd fueled them up. And I won't say who went over there, but this person went over there with a shotgun and buckshot and hid in the woods to see who was doing it. And this boy come up the railroad track, had on it was cool, had on a Mackinac, had a hat, cap on, and a Mackinac jacket, and he had 2 5-gallon cans, one in each hand, and he walked up with siphon hose around his neck, stopped at a truck, started the siphon hose in one of them, and while it was going, he went down to the next truck and did the same thing. And while he was bent over, putting that siphon hose, this person shot him from the backside from about 150 feet with buckshot. Well, he screamed, ran down the track to his house. The gasoline was running out on the ground in one of them. This person, I won't say who it was, went over and pulled the hose up out of the can so it stopped. And this boy went home, told his daddy he'd been shot. Well, the guy that ran the tipple and his wife and daughter were at church that night on Sunday night. Well, the guy went to church with his shotgun to see this guy. Well, they told him this guy, he'd been here the whole time. It wasn't him that done it. So he went to the doctor. They took him to the hospital because he had buckshot in the back of his ears and his rear end and his scrotum. And his doctor was picking those out. And the sheriff was there. And the sheriff asked him, said, what happened? He said, I was just walking down the railroad track and this guy shot me. He said, he sure was. You must have been walking in a funny position to get hit the places you got hit. I don't know if they ever found out who did that. Then I talked about the girl I picked up. We were over in a prospect hole up on, I guess it was Double Creek, at the head of Double Creek.
Redbird.
And off of Redbird. And there was a guy named Jackson up there, had a daughter that got pregnant. I don't know who, by one of the workers or whether it's boyfriend or what. But she was about to have the baby any minute. And she came walking, her and her mother came walking down by there on the way to Redbird Hospital, which was 5 or 6 miles away. The mother asked me if I'd take her over there in my Jeep, since she didn't think she could make it all the way without having the baby. And I said, I can't do it in a government vehicle because it's against our regulation. Well, Jack Fallbush was my dozer operator. And he said, Ray, you know that I'm not going to tell on you if you take her over to the hospital. That she needs to go. And I said, all right. So I got her, took her in the Jeep and took her to the hospital on Redbird. And when I got over there, of course, took her in, her expecting like that. They started throwing questions at me. And I said, no, wait a minute. I said, I don't have nothing to do with this. I just picked her up and brought her over here because I was afraid she wasn't going to make it over here by herself, you know. And so I left, and she did have the baby as a little boy, and her mother told us about it. And I understand that the doctor at Redbird Hospital adopted the baby. It turned out pretty good, but the Jackson was a good guy. We were over there near his house, and he told me there was a 30-inch coal seam down behind his house by his barn, in his barn lot. And I said, well, you care if I go down there and face it up with my dozer? And he said, no. So I went down there, I faced it up, and it was only 13 inches thick. He said, well, I would have swore that it was 30. And I took my dozer and pushed a bunch of cow manure and stuff up into where I'd opened it. And I said, I'll push this in there, maybe it'll grow.
Sounds like a blue jam.
Yeah, well, I think maybe it was. There was one up on Jacks Creek, a woman and man up there. The man was about in his 50s probably, and the girl, I thought it was his daughter. It looked like she was probably 20, 25. And I stopped there and told him I was going to put a drill hole up behind his house, and then that we'd be in there on Monday morning. And he asked me, did I have anything to smoke? And I told him I didn't smoke. And he said, well, I'd like to have something. And I said, do you like cigars? And he said, yeah, I do. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I said, when they come in here Monday, I'll get you some cigars and send them to you, and they'll give them to you. He said, that's fine. So on Monday, I wasn't up there. I was in the office, but I sent the boy that helped me up there, and I gave him some cigars. I think I gave him a dozen cigars. I paid about 50 cents a piece for them down there in Middlesboro. And he got there. Well, he must have caught the old man in a bad mood or something, because when he offered that man those cigars, he said, I know you. He said, you came in here to see my wife, didn't you? He said, I'll kill you if you come back. He said, don't you ever come back up here. And he ran him off, wouldn't even take the cigars, and I had to go up there and talk to him and get the drill hole straightened out. The boy was afraid to go back, which I don't doubt it. I mean, I don't blame him. Oh, there's one on down and happened at Middlesboro that's funny up on Beans Fort. There's a last house and up going up, and then we had a property line. We were on American Association till we got up to a certain point. Then we all went off of them onto another property. Well, where we had a gate up at the property line, we always give the last house in that hollow next to the gate a key to the gate. So if somebody had to get in, they could, or they could go in themselves. Well, that particular day, I went up there and stopped at the last house. And there was a woman out in the yard, and a middle-aged woman. And I walked over to her and I said, "Is your husband here?" Because usually we talk to the man, She said, "Yeah, he's here." I said, "Well, can I talk to him?" She said, "Well, you can't hardly talk to him, but he's here." And she said, "Come around here." And she come around, she pointed at a grave. She said, "He wouldn't leave the women alone, so I killed him. There he is." Said, "He'll be here anytime you want to be."
My goodness.
That was in the last house on Bean Fork on the left. I never will forget it. And I doubt if she's still alive, though. That happened in 1962. This story happened over at, we were drilling an oil well, and I was in the business with a couple of guys out of Middlesboro, Shackelford and Moore. And Shackelford had a constable's car, had lights on it and a siren. It looked like a police car. And so we went over to check the oil rig, and we got to a little restaurant down there. It was a Scotty's, I believe, something similar. And we went in, and there wasn't any place to sit. And it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. So, being the comics they were, Dallas turned to Moore and said, "You reckon we ought to lift him in the car, or you want to put handcuffs on him, keep him from killing somebody?" And said, when he said that, there was a lot of the people got up and left.
They made room.
So we had plenty of room to sit down. We were mining in Dade County, or in Marion County, Tennessee, and it joined Dade County, Georgia, on top of Sand Mountain. And we were mining there. And on the Dade County side, at New Home, a man had killed his neighbor the couple of days before, and they'd shot him over chickens being in the garden or something. But anyway, we had people stealing coal out of our stockpile. So Claude Watts was our night watchman. And we decided on that night, it was about midnight when I was out there leaving, we decided we'd drive up to the stockpile and see if we could find anybody up there. So we drove up to the stockpile, and when we pulled in the stockpile, there was a car there. And so it was the sheriff of Dade County. He was over in Tennessee, and Claude Watts knew the sheriff because Claude had been sheriff of Marion County for about 20 years, but he wasn't at that time. But he rolled his window down and asked the sheriff, said, "Sheriff, what are you doing out here this time of night?" Dade County Sheriff said, "Well, you know about that murder out here the other night." Said, "Well, I'm out here interrogating his wife." He had her in the back seat of his car, and he was interrogating her.
Yeah, he's interrogating her.
I mean, that was. And Claude said, "Yeah, sure," and rolled his window, and we drove off.
Well, we could just go on and on. He's got so many stories. And I want to thank Ray for sitting down talking with me. He's got so many other stories just besides the funny ones. I thought I'd share these first. So I'll share some of his other adventures and things at times he's had in these mountains. So I hope you enjoyed. Take care out there. God bless, and I'll see you next time.